singing.
Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing, fresh from the word, sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness, where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one night Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of a new day.
Hello and welcome to Chats, a television podcast, Season 5, DaisyChatz. My name is Alan, and I'm joined by the head writer for Jews for Cheese's non-denominational branch. It's Magellan.
Hey, how's it going, man?
How's it going? That was like draft 3 because I was like, yeah, Jews for Cheese is a great joke. And then I was like, Magellan's not Jewish. Let's work that out. So you're part of, you're like the historical, history of Jewish cheeses.
Yeah.
What's your favorite cheese?
Munster. I've never had. I don't think I've ever had Munster. Well, maybe once. Onster.
What?
But
Onester, Twicester, yeah.
Yeah, Twicester. Probably a nice. I don't know. It depends on the context of the cheese. I gotta say, there isn't like a one cheese that's best. It's dish by dish.
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 I never had string cheese until your house. That time that we had string cheese.
Is that your favorite kind of cheese?
No. I just wanted to talk about string cheese. My favorite cheese, probably a good sharp cheddar with a cracker.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god,
Put
my
that right on a cracker. Yeah.
My mom recently just brought home a bit. Yeah, Pusha T is on our podcast today. Tell us about everything, Pusha, please.
Yeah.
My mom just bought a big block of cheddar, of sharp cheddar recently, and I'm just picking at it slowly. I ran out of crackers before I ran out of cheese, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. You gotta get more of those. Crackers.
I do, but I did not run out of things to say about Pushing Daisies.
Hey, Segway boy.
That's what it is. Ride on Segway like a mall cop, baby. Here on DaisyChatz, we watch 2 episodes of the TV show Pushing Daisies every week. This week, we watched Season 1, Episode 7, Smell of Success. We also watched Season 1, Episode 8, Bittersweets. But first, we're talking about Smell of Success, which was written by Scott Niemerfo, directed by Lawrence Trilling, and it aired November 21st, 2007.
Sweet.
Magellan, what happened?
In this episode, Ned and Chuck argue over whether or not he should sell cup pies at the pie hole. Emerson receives a call from the mother of Anita Gray, a woman who was the apprentice of Napoleon Linez. Linez was working on a self-help book on the power of sense and memories called The Smell of Success when Anita was killed by a mysterious explosion. A revived Anita reveals that she was killed while sniffing a scratch-and-sniff patch that reminded her of her grandmother, and they conclude that the patch was rigged to explode. The crew initially accuses rival author Chaz Spielman of murdering Anita, but he denies it because his book's release was pushed up to a worse window, so he had no motive. The gang finds evidence that supposedly came from one Oscar Vabenius, Linez's lab partner and friend, before they split up over odor theories. While our characters look for Oscar in the nearby sewers, Linez's car explodes above them on the ground level due to a methane gas leak. When the news bring on Linez and Emerson to showcase the crime, Linez accuses Oscar of the attempts on his life. The gang follow up by visiting Oscar, who claims he did not murder Linez. He tells them that all of the evidence was made obvious so that Oscar could be sent to jail, and the attempts on Linez's life would help increase sales of his book. When they come to interrogate Linez about all of this, he attempts to gas them to death, but the tables are turned thanks to Oscar. Linez is overpowered by all the smells and goes unconscious. Meanwhile, Olive is attempting to get Chuck's aunts back into swimming by using the smell of chlorine to jog their memory. Sorry. The show is ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is.
After several failed attempts, this eventually works when Vivian bursts into a musical number and inspires Lily to return to their synchronized swimming together. Ned acquiesces to Chuck's cup pie idea, and it is revealed at the end of the episode that Oscar may be onto Chuck's secret.
Oh.
Oh.
Well, this is a weird episode. I think, first of all, Vivinia's fantastic performance by Pee Wee Herman. Who's Pee Wee Herman? Oh my god, I'm so sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Paul Reubens.
Yeah,
Paul Reubens, I love you. Paul Reubens, killing it. Did not recognize him with those funny goggles.
No, me neither.
I really like this thing the show is now doing consistently, where the villain, like the first implicated villain, is often not the real villain. Like, it's not the sort of like physically unattractive or unkempt person who is easy to point fingers at. It's actually like the rich, traditionally like nice person.
Yeah.
Or like the capitalist or the rich, like it's usually like the rich guy is the bad guy, and it's not the like gremlin that lives in the sewers, which I think is nice. It suggests that the villains that we make aren't necessarily true villains, and like real actual evil villainy comes from the amongst us. It's not like something that we square away.
Yeah.
What did you think of this episode, dude?
I enjoyed it. I can take or leave. What I want to talk about first, I think, is the ants stuff, because I can take or leave it. The Darling Mermaid Darlings, like, are they going to swim again or not?
Yeah.
Plotline. It was nice at first that Olive had some other characters to interact with, but now it kind of feels like they just keep putting them in every episode because they're on the cast, and it doesn't. I don't know. It just didn't feel that purposeful, or like that good a use of time here. So I was not super engaged in that. And then I think the main plot, the main case, is like a solid, fun, again, case of the week, right? We don't get significant character development that I can think of, or significant show plot development. It's just like, what if we did an episode about all these crazy people who love to smell stuff? And it's fun. So I had fun. That's my take. But there's a lot of stuff in it where it's like, whatever, I can take it or leave it. Right.
Well, the getting the aunts back to swim again is, like you said, it's just like we want to see these characters do more. And it's all his plot throughout the season now has been, I want to help these aunts out, and it's her and Chuck bonding. Like, we complained a lot earlier on about how it feels like they're just setting up Chuck and Olive to fight often, like over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
But Chuck is the one who tells her, like, hey, you are my avenue with which I can speak to my aunts. I want you to help them and make their lives better and return them to their happiest point in life.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to get them back in the pool, basically. So Olive, in a way, comes off as very altruistic because of this, and very and very helpful, which I think is honestly, it's a net positive for Olive after all the stuff that she's been through this season.
Yeah.
And I just like the aunts. I think those actresses are really great because they like age, and characters of that age specifically are often either villainous or just like crotchety or like performatively nice, and they're just people. Like, they're not weird old ladies, you know what I mean? Like, I think in this episode it's Lily's the one with the eye patch. That's how I always remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Lily like smells the chlorine, and they get all excited, and then she burps, and she's like, well, all right, like, just kind of like breathes out, and it's like, oh, I guess that didn't work. And it's just like played as very straight, and it's like, well, that didn't work. Like, we have to figure things out. And it's not. It honestly contrasts with the fairy tale nature of the rest of the show, like how normal the two of them are. Obviously, the way they look and the way they like the like house that they live in is very fairy tale like, but they're just people, you know.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I like them a lot, and I don't. But the thing is, like, I don't know where you take those characters. I think part of the problem with us tracing arcs right now is this show is in writer's strike limbo, and also
Right. That's true.
technically, like, we are right next to a finale, and I don't know if they knew they were getting a second season. So maybe they're just like, well, that was it. That was the On's plot. Was they finally got back into the pool.
That's true.
But man, that final musical number from Vivian it's beautiful. It's honestly beautiful. And the way that they play it while they're getting into the water and then they're encouraging each other to swim together, it's like really touching.
It's very sweet, yeah.
Oh my god, this show, like, it sneaks up on you how nice this show makes me feel often, because I watch it the way I watch every chat show, where I'm just like, I'm sitting in my room, or I'm on my computer, and I'm just watching, and I'm mostly focusing on taking notes. And like, halfway through this episode, I just stopped taking notes because I was just enjoying the way it made me feel. It's very comforting. I feel like it's very easy to just watch and feel good.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good word for it. It's comforting. I agree.
There is still weirdness about, obviously, the like homeopathic medicine, but we are getting that guy back. I think he ends up being more of a big deal in the second episode. The guy who sold all of the medicine originally. That's the Raul Esparza character, who I forgot. I didn't even pick up on because he has his hair dyed in this show. But he's great. I just wanted to shout out my mans. God, yeah. So the main plot, the whole cup pies thing. Do we care about Chuck wanting to make? It's like it's an excuse for them. They really seem to like having that actress who plays Chuck like describe things in detail and repeatedly to different people. Like, oh, cup pies. They're like pies, except they're small and they're like cupcakes and they smell like honey and they're filled with honey and then warmth. And then someone's like, wait, what's a cup pie? And she's like, oh, we know cup pies. It's like a pie, but it's filled with honey and warmth. And it's like, like, that's the bit.
It's just like, why is this like a fight that they have? You know?
I mean, I think it's a really, maybe it's a simple way to just go like, oh, Ned doesn't like change. Because she's like, oh, this is basically pie. People make different things in bakeries all the time. And he's like, no, it has to be pies. It has to be traditionally shaped pies. And I have to make them. Because he is the kind of guy who doesn't like change, doesn't want things to fall out of his control, and doesn't want to have to accommodate things.
Yeah.
Which is interesting considering his relationship to Chuck, obviously.
Yeah. I guess when you say the idea of like control, that makes a little more sense to me. It seemed like, I don't know, giving Ned the character trait of he doesn't like things to change seems sort of arbitrary and doesn't really hit at the heart of like who he is. But I think it is true that he definitely wants control of like his own perfect corner of the world where he knows exactly how it works and it's not going to be disrupted in any way. So I guess that relates, but it's kind of, the episode is kind of presenting it as like, oh, he doesn't like change, which I think is it's an oversimplification of what's going on there.
Yeah, he's much more complex than that. We know that from the season.
Yeah.
And I think there's merit. Like I often am someone who's like, it's easy to get comfortable. I'd rather get comfortable than accept difference. But it's also such a small petty thing, and they don't like give it a lot of time in the episode. It's just kind of like, all right, fine. And then the episode ends and he does it. Like he lets her.
Yeah, that's what I think rubbed me the wrong way, is that the end of the episode is it's shot in like singles of both of them facing each other, and he's like, here's the menu, and gives it to her, and it's like, look, I did it. And then they're like pretending to hug each other, and it's like, why you didn't earn this moment where I'm supposed to feel like their love is the truest love ever,
right?
Just because Ned is like, oh, that idea you had that makes sense, yeah, we'll do that. Because like, who's going into a pie shop and being like, let me just sit down and order myself a whole pie? I guess they're getting slices.
They're getting slices, but yeah.
But whatever. It's fine. I wasn't like bothered by it, but it just, you didn't really earn the sweet Ned Chuck moment this time around. Pushing Daisies.
PD. Okay. So the Ned and Chuck stuff in this episode, and actually in the next episode, both reminded me weirdly. And I'm probably the first person to ever make this comparison, but this show is starting to remind me of Bob's Burgers.
Okay.
Because in this one, the main guy, who's the chef, the baker, neglects or refuses to change and doesn't want to change because traditionalism works and people like old-fashioned pie or people like old-fashioned burgers. That's Bob from Bob's Burgers to a T, at least early in the show. And then in the second episode, the whole like rival shop thing is like at the core of Bob's Burgers. And I guess just that's a common thing, right? Is you own a restaurant, and like how many types of plots can you do with a restaurant? Either there's a traditionalist who doesn't want to try new things but has new things introduced to them, or there's a rival store doing way better things and they have to change to accommodate that.
Yeah, that's true. Those are pretty standard, like small business show plots, or like I'm sure they did those plots in like the run on That 70s Show where one of the characters owned a record store, or when Red Foreman owned his muffler shop or something.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, I think those things show up a lot in these sorts of shows.
It's like thematic popcorn. It's super easy to just be like, oh, this guy doesn't like change because blank blank blank.
Yeah.
Things that I really liked in this episode though, there is a lot of good jokes about like writers and journalism because of the main guy being the main like villain being a book writer. Somebody they interrogate at one point. It's like, oh, you guys are talking about that guy who was his like apprentice was killed in an explosion, and they're like, how did you hear about that? And he goes, word travels fast in literary circles. Which is one of those lines that I unpacked over and over again. I was like, oh my God, this is very good. This is really clever. I liked the stinky sock letter. I liked that the way that they found it's just like an old noir movie, except instead of like a dead bird with like a note attached to it, it's just like a smelly sock with
bright,
like
colorful sock. Yeah,
exactly. Like, hey, I did it, or hey, what's it called? Someone else is gonna die. And then I really, really appreciated the way that Paul Reubens' character is great. He's sort of the guy that they point fingers at as like, oh, that's easy. We found the villain. It's so great when we find him this fast. Looks like we got a bad guy, and then the actual bad guy is like, no, it's because it's easy for us to put the blame on our weird rivals, and that's where that comes from. I had a line about that Paul Reubens said or thought that I loved, and it's gone.
Yeah, I like the Napoleon Oscar dichotomy because it helps to ground what exactly this episode is trying to say. I think ultimately, like, this show works. The formula of this show is we see a case where there are these really weird side characters that have a certain outlooks on life. And those outlooks or life philosophies help to inform how we're thinking about Ned and Chuck's relationship for that week. And so to me, this time around, it is a debate over, on the one hand, Napoleon is this guy who loves things to be perfect, and he loves things to be like totally manicured and presented in exactly the right way. And Oscar is somebody who wants there to be reality in his work and wants to be connected to the real world and is more flexible to things being surprising or things being upsetting. And so that you can in some ways graft that onto Ned, who is more of like a Napoleon Linez figure because he wants to have his hermetically sealed portion of the world, and he's got to learn how to let that go.
Yeah, I really love it when the show's villains relate back to our A plot or relate back to Ned and Chuck's plot. It's not even that hard to make those reads, but it's really interesting when it works out that cleanly.
Yeah.
The thing I was going to mention was just the reveal that, like, it's really cool because what's Oscar? Oscar's the character's name.
Yeah.
When Chuck and Olive go to talk to Oscar and ask him about the crime, he's like, I couldn't have done it. You guys smelled methane gas, right? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, all right. And he just kind of sits back and he's like, basically like, officer, I've given you all the clues. It's time for you to solve the murder. And then you just get to watch them do that thing, where they're like, well, methane gas doesn't smell bad.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't have smelled it. And he's like, yeah, you did it. Great job. You figured it out. like, oh, that's really cool when you get to watch the gears turn in characters' heads and do it yourself.
Yeah.
And then they learned, like, yeah, the reason that the methane gas smelled bad was because he wanted to get the guy to get caught because he made the crime too obvious to not be seen. the dude blew up his own car for a freak's sake. Like, this guy is a bad person.
Yeah, this was the first episode where I sort of predicted what the solution of the crime was going to be before it showed up, and that was a cool feeling because it felt like it's a real mystery, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes these shows will throw you a curveball in the last few minutes for the sake of keeping you on your toes, but this one I think I knew probably like 30 minutes in, 25 minutes in, like, oh, he is doing it himself.
Yeah.
Which in some ways is predictable, but in some ways it's a nice feeling as an audience member to be able to say, oh, I get what you're doing. Cool. And now I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to bring up my detective fiction class 2 weeks in a row, but in my detective fiction class, we were talking about the origins of this genre of storytelling. And in its inception, all detective fiction was solvable by the reader. That was the whole point, was like enjoying the mystery being solved, but then if you turn the page, we're going to give you the answer, but you could have figured it out with all the things that we gave you. And that's like all in my professor's mind. The thesis is like, that is what good detective fiction is it's hard, it's not impossible to solve it, but it's hard enough that it's a fun challenge. And now they write these detective stories in ways where you couldn't have solved it because they can either hand wave it and say magic, or they can introduce a character you haven't met or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and it, you know, a television procedural is not a classic detective story.
Yeah.
We've sort of shifted away in television in terms of what exactly it is we want our formula to be. And for a police procedural or any kind of investigatory procedural, it's not really about like you were able to solve it. It's more about were you kept around after the commercial break. Yeah,
right. It's designed around the format of television.
Yeah.
So he gets caught. There's that whole that really fun action scene where just like something out of Austin Powers or something where he's trying to gas them, and then they are like, oh well, we got Oscar's help, so whoop, and then the guy just passes out. That could have gone a lot darker. I was happy it didn't go too dark. Like when I was writing the summary and it was like I wrote the phrase gassed to death, I felt really weird. But that is what he's trying to do. It's just the fact that it doesn't work takes away some of the sting of that. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward. Like, I think what I'm noticing is this show doesn't really care about how we dispatch its villains. It's more about finding out who they are, and then after that, everything is like, well, and then we won because we're awesome.
Yeah.
Like I remember in not the last episode, but the one right before that had the funny name. That's about the horses.
Don't remember what it was called.
Girth. The way that they beat the villain in Girth is they hit her with a shovel and then they win. Yeah. Like there is no complicated plot at the end there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then there's this reveal at the end. I guess that Oscar is still around and knows about Chuck, maybe because he smells death on her.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what exactly that means. I don't know yet.
If anything.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this show might not have a lot of time to answer that unless they do it in season 2.
Right, because there's only one more episode of season 1.
Correct. But yeah, that's what I got. Do you have any spare notes, spare change?
I just really liked Napoleon Linez meeting people and smelling them and describing how they smelled. The sense of smell is not something that is typically capitalized upon in literature, at least in my mind. Like, of the 5 senses, I think it's the one that people think about the least when thinking about like how to describe things or how to create imagery or whatever the case may be. So I like that this show is committed to being literary and being fabulistic and being whimsical in ways that we don't see in other places. I also I thought the pop-up book store guy was hilarious.
Yeah, porn pop-up guy.
Yeah, really well delivered. And then he has all these weird adult pop-up books in his store. Mm-hmm. Just such a... That must have been on a whiteboard where they're just brainstorming like things that feel like they fit in this world.
Right.
And that
pop-up
totally feels like it fits in this world. And then Emerson loving pop-up books and making a pop-up book. It was cute.
It was super cute. I love it when Emerson's plot ends with him doing something cute. That makes me very happy.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else big in here, but you hit some very good points, man. Do you want to hear some trivia?
Please.
The title card has changed in this episode. Instead of a bunch of daisies in a field forming the title, a finger touches a dead daisy with the title on it, and the camera goes under with the roots of the daisy forming the words created by Brian Fuller.
Nice. Yeah,
I feel like I've seen that. Yeah, it's a cool effect. I also like that the show doesn't, like, in the episodes, the theme song isn't that long. The one that I have, like, at the beginning of our show is a little longer, but it's just like, Pushing Daisies, done, basically. And then the pie hole menu is shown here for the first time with an additional new item on the menu. Cup pie, $5.95 for a slice of pie, any flavor, or for a cup pie. And then just references. There's a reference to Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, which is a puppet show, I guess. I already knew that Brian Fuller is a fan of puppets. Chuck says that she is not Quasimodo in a bell tower. I loved that scene, by the way, where Ned is like, Quasimodo is right. If he stayed inside, nothing bad would have happened to him. She's like, he went on adventures, Doc. He got to have a Disney movie.
Right.
That suggests a lot about their relationship that I loved.
Yeah.
Lynette says, when I suggested you gentlemen leave, I didn't mean the penthouse, but the mortal coil, which is a reference to Hamlet. Oh, leave this mortal coil. Yes.
Yeah.
Chuck makes multiple references to Chud, a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller, which is a 1984 horror film that she's quoting. There's a reference to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book On Death and Dying. Olive almost remembers the stages of death as something acceptance. And finally, Chuck happily instructs her comrades to, while in the sewer looking for Oscar, follow the yellow thick hose.
Yeah. That was kind of funny the first time, and then they kept saying it.
They kept saying it, yeah, and I was like, I'm good, guys, come on.
We get it. Thank you.
We get it. Whew, but that is going to do it for our discussion of this first episode. Let's read some feedback. We got one email this week, and it's from our buddy Hugo. He says, Emerson's face during the all the gold reveal was priceless. I'm not sure I remember that moment. Oh, no, yeah, I do. That's for just one of the classic Emerson face. He says, Olive's backstory did not necessarily feel like a throwaway moment for me, though I can understand why it read as such to you. She is absolutely the member of the main cast who is/was the most in need of backstory exploration, though I felt as though that was filled, at least partially. As much as I dislike when characters develop random traits to fit plot, I feel like when you're 5 episodes into a show, that's bound to happen. After all, how well can you get to know a character in an ensemble in 4 episodes? It's a good point.
Yeah, I think my issue with it, like, yeah, that's true that you're going to learn things about characters in the course of, like, you want episode plots to relate to characters' backstories, ultimately. That's nice, but that's like a tight way to tell a story and develop characters at the same time. I think my issue was just that it didn't feel like there was a logical connection between it being Olive and her being a jockey. Like, there wasn't, it just didn't seem like that needed to be her backstory. Whereas, I don't know, like, let's say, for example, I can't think of a great example, but like if we go all the way back to thinking about Farscape, when we covered Farscape, there were plenty of stories that revolved around like learning something about a character's background. So, for example, The Way We Weren't, is that what that one was called? With Aaron Sun and Pilot, and like she helped kill the old pilot or something.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah,
I know the one you're talking about.
Like, you kind of just learn. It's this retcon of one of the main characters and showing this kind of terrible thing that she did in her past and exploring that as a way of exploring who she is. And that to me is the way that you do that. You create like this event that has some sort of significance and resonance with another character or relates to something you already know about them. And I just didn't think that, like, Olive being a jockey, why? But anyway.
It just, like we said, it just ties her to the tension of the episode. It gives us a character with that tension.
But I appreciate the comment and the push.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that. He goes on to say, and this is a kind of a spicy, longer one, I have to say that I do not believe that the show is necessarily trying to ridicule blackness. Obviously, I'm not a person of color myself. I don't know if that's obvious. And I don't want to speak on anyone's behalf. Should one have a different opinion, I'd, of course, love to listen to them. But At the risk of failing the easy solution, Shy McBride clearly did not have a problem with the material as he performed it. As you already brought up, this is not the same as if he himself said this in an interview while speaking in an unscripted way, but there have been known cases during productions where a cast member raised an issue with the script and it was modified.
Yeah.
One person's seal of approval does not make it perfect, but I do think it needs to be noted. As Emerson is a black character, a certain degree of, quote, blackness will inherently propel his character forward. Granted, there is a fine line between laughing at and laughing with this.
Yeah.
Of course, Pushing Daisy's world being so whimsical and frankly different makes it an open question of what exactly does it mean to be black within this universe?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the exact same as our own? I really wish that this was something that had been explored further, but unfortunately the series is so short. Let's just throw that onto the pie of missed opportunities.
It's a good point. I think when I listen back to us talking about that moment from episode 6 with Emerson's line, what I noticed is that there was an erasure on our parts of Chi McBride's agency in the process of that line being created and being delivered. So I appreciate that. Like, we should acknowledge that he was a part of that creative process. I think some of my concerns still stand, but with that caveat.
Right. Well, I mean, my problem with it is still people say lines and do roles that they don't support personally all the time. Unfortunately, that is just the nature of Hollywood. But
True.
I mean,
we just have no way of knowing.
Right. We have no way of knowing. We have no way of being able to speak for this. But that email is very good, Hugo. I appreciate you pointing that out. So
keep it up. Thank you.
And if you would like to email us at the Chats offices, you can do so by sending it to chatspod@gmail.com. That's CHATZPOD @gmail.com. That is going to do it for our feedback segment. We're going to be right back to discuss bittersweets.
It sounded like you said gmail.com.
I did.
Okay. Welcome back to DaisyChatz. The second episode we watched this week was Season 1, Episode 8, Bittersweets, which was written by Abby Gawanter. Gawanter? Giwanter. Pick the one that you like.
It's a seek and find.
Yeah, and directed by Alan Croker. It aired on November 28th, 2007. Alan?
Yes?
What happened in this episode?
Well, Magellan, I'm glad you asked. In this episode, Ned's flashback is about how he met his childhood friend, Eugene Mulchandani. After seeing him revive a pile of dead leaves, Eugene runs away and never comes back, leaving Ned alone as ever. In the present, Chuck asks Ned if they're boyfriend and girlfriend, and remarks that today would have been her father's 60th birthday. A man named Alfredo arrives at the pie hole, and Olive doesn't remember that she served him several episodes ago, or that he was the one who originally sold her the homeopathic antidepressants. Emerson comes in with an easy case this time. One Tina Arangino hires him to solve the murder of her boyfriend, Tony DiNapoli. She accuses burly Bruce Carter, a friend who had invited Tony and Tina to a double date with him and his real doll girlfriend, Sheila. When Tony made fun of Bruce for having a, quote, fake girlfriend, Bruce strangles Tony with his girlfriend's hands. When they accuse Bruce of the murder, he immediately confesses to the crime and is sent to jail. With 30 minutes left in the episode, the focus shifts entirely to a newly opened candy store across the street from the pie hole called Bittersweets. One Billy Balsam comes to advertise the store, and the gang decides to visit the competition. It is there that they meet Billy's sister Dilly, their fiercely competitive new rival. Couple this with a series of unfortunate circumstances that lead to the pie hole temporarily shutting down, and the gang suspects foul play. Olive and Chuck retaliate by releasing rats into Bittersweets. When Ned goes to undo the mess, he accidentally brings Billy back to life in a vat of candy, but immediately kills him again before getting arrested. After a fingerprint fiasco, we learn that the health inspector was blackmailing Billy and Dilly after they bribed him to shut down the pie hole. After the health inspector is apprehended mysteriously, everyone goes on their merry way. Ned and Chuck have a private conversation where he finally reveals to her that he was the one who killed her father. So, okay, I think this episode, I'm usually the type of person who's like, this episode's too slow. Like, slow is always my worst complaint about television shows. Yeah. I think 45 minutes is more often than not too much time.
I agree.
This episode's too much.
Yeah.
And it's not, like, it's just too many things in one episode.
Yes, I agree.
It's, like, you had mentioned that by the second half, you were like, I'm clocked out entirely on this. Like, and it's not just because...
Yeah, I was, like, eating my dinner, and then, like, somebody texted me, and then I looked back, and like we'd solved a whole case.
Yeah.
And there's like a candy store, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna be able to follow this one. I messed up.
Which is fine. Like, it's not a complicated episode. It's just that they kind of try to relate the two cases to each other, but it's like hilarious how easy the first case is.
Yeah.
Like, they go to the guy's
Yeah.
house, and he's like, "Don't tell them Sheila," and Sheila's his real doll, so she doesn't talk. And he's like, "Yeah, we did it. Yeah, we totally did it. There's no other suspect. There's no investigation. There's no resurrection needed. Done. Figured it out."
Which I like. I like that the show flips the script a little bit on the formula, but then it just does the formula with the rest of the time.
Right. The candy store episode is totally the like a traditional Pushing Daisies thing.
Right.
That could have been an episode.
Yeah.
I liked again how that was really fast though. I felt like I could just like literally cut out the first like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Although one thing I really really liked about the real doll plot was, and I worried about this when we were reading the summary, this show doesn't judge its villains that harshly.
Yeah, they didn't make it a joke of like this guy and his doll or whatever.
Right. And both Ned and Chuck are like, what is her name? Like, we're going to call her by her name, and we're going to treat her the way you treat her, which is like she's a person. She gets arrested with them, or she gets sent to jail with them, I guess, and gets processed or whatever. They don't have, like, they don't even have Emerson making a joke about, like, this guy's a freaking weird. Like, maybe they do, but it's not, like, a big enough deal to matter.
Well, and
like,
Emerson is clearly presented as, like, wrong for doing that when he does that.
Right. And the reason that once Ned goes to jail because of the second half's plot, he's in jail with that guy, and it's a moment where you're like, oh, this is the man who put me in jail. He could he has reason to kill me right now.
Mm-hmm.
But Ned is like, oh, let's talk about Sheila. Tell me how you met her. Like, opens up to the person who already feels so isolated from the world, and saves his own life by being empathetic. Which I love. I love that about Ned in this moment. Because you don't see enough heroes that solve problems through empathy and solve problems through taking a minute to listen and to understand. I think that's a really underserved character type in media.
Totally. Well, and it kind of, I think, speaks to what we said a couple episodes ago about like an intentionally different strand of masculinity that Ned is representing.
Right.
Yeah, I think it relates to that. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. It's just a really great plot. I think there are a couple other stray things that besides just the candy store plot. Raul Esparza as the salesman guy mostly didn't pay off during the episode because it's just like, oh, Olive remembers this guy and thinks she sort of has feelings for him. Maybe. The reason I thought about that and the reason that was solidified for me was the end of, like, not literally the final shot of the episode, but one of the final scenes is Olive is sitting in the pie hole and the guy comes in and they have like a really longing glance and then they like get close and it seems like they're about to have a romantic moment and then she blinks and she's dreaming. And I was like, wait, whoa, like, yeah, okay, there we go.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, this episode like snaps its fingers and says, hey, the show's gonna end soon. We need to do things right now. I almost think that's why it's paced like this. I think they were just like, we had like 2 more plots and don't know how many more episodes we're getting.
Yeah,
Let's
I think that's definitely accurate. That sounds right to me.
It just makes a lot of sense, like this late into the season and them not knowing what they were gonna get. It just feels like might as well go for broke.
We get this episode. Ned and Chuck say that they're boyfriend and girlfriend. And so they're 16-year-olds. Yeah, and so a lot of Olive's, or part of Olive's plot is about with the. Is that who that is? The salesman? Is that the
that's the
espresso machine guy?
Yes.
Yeah, with him, she's trying to reflect on, can they even be in love if they're not touching each other, which is something that we've talked about before, and it was intentionally very cheesy, but his response was. I was moved by it and the poetry of it. I think like this is a show that its characters can be really, really over the top poetic and saccharine.
Yeah.
But because of the way the show is presented to you, you're allowed to take it at face value and be like, yeah, Yeah, that is what love is. It is about like lighting the torch inside your cave self or something if you're blind or whatever he said.
Right.
Yeah, so I like that.
It's I want to see more of the two of them. I wish it makes me sad thinking about Olive in this, because like if this is the show feeling like it's on its last breath and then getting a second wind, like what does this mean for Olive in season 2? I really hope that there's something exciting happens with her now.
It doesn't seem like they can get that much more mileage out of her being in love with Ned but unable to be with him. I don't know what else there is to be said about that.
22 episodes worth of something that is the answer to that.
Is that how long season 2 is?
Yeah, it's like 3 times as long.
Oh wow. Okay.
So we have a lot of Pushing Daisies left. I'm curious. This is not the last episode of the season. We still have next week, but like, where do they even go? That'll be an easier question to answer next week. But yeah, seeing Olive like kind of come to terms with another person, and answer all these questions it's really something.
Yeah.
But we can talk about the candy store plot if you don't mind.
Sure, let's do it.
They catch the guy. He goes to jail. Tony DiNapoli is avenged, and then also we have a new store across the street, Bitter Sweets. Their whole gimmick is they give you something bitter, and then you have candy to make the candy taste sweeter, which is really funny.
Yeah.
And sounds like a store, like a pop-up Brooklyn candy store that you would see like now today.
Yeah.
We may make fun of Brooklyn a lot on this podcast.
Hey yo.
Hey, Brooklyn.
It also relates to the book that I read from last week, Eros the Bittersweet. Same
Wow.
idea. Love. There's like bitterness and sweetness, and
Yeah.
they contrast with each other and make the other more exaggerated.
Powerful, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely in bittersweet love with Molly Shannon in this episode. I love Molly Shannon.
Oh, she's amazing. She's wonderful.
She's one of the best.
Yeah.
And she brings so much to this character. It doesn't even have to. She's like in 15 minutes of this episode, and her and Paul Reubens are the standouts of this entire like batch. But her like with the wig and like pretending to cry and like being super over dramatic and then like cackling when everybody leaves.
She's so good.
She's delicious villainry in this episode, and like the fake stutter, and not only, and I love that. Of course, this show did this because these writers are pretty smart. But she does a fake stutter, and then comes back and says like, "Oh, that's kind of offensive to do a fake stutter. Like that's someone's actual life problem." And you're like, "Wow, Pushing Daisies, you went and did it."
Yeah.
High five to this show for knowing when they make weird goofs like that and acknowledging it in the characters.
Right.
It's really funny, and it adds a lot of dimension to her whole character. Her brother is kind of dispatched of unceremoniously. I think, again, because this part of the episode has so little time, them being like, it was the health inspector is like super easy.
Yeah.
It's another like, you can solve this because there was nobody else introduced in this plot line.
Right. Yeah. You're just
and his motive was you guys. Right. His motive was you guys blackmailed me. I'm gonna blackmail you for the same because money.
Right. Yeah.
All right, guys.
Yeah. Whatever. It's just a means to an end.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
This all ends up with Ned in jail and talking to the guy and the empathy and the open-mindedness saving his ass, and then just the bad guy either gets caught or gets killed by Molly Shannon's character. This is where we were confused. He's kind of left in limbo. I'm not sure. I think it's mostly a goof. Like if he was captured by her, then it's like, oh man, that's dark. And if he was put in jail, then he was put in jail. It's not a big deal.
Right.
I have a couple of stray goofs from this episode that I liked.
Okay.
Also it ends with, hey guys, Ned just told Chuck, hey, I killed your dad. We finally did it. I'm really happy that they did it.
In what world does he say it that way, though? Like, why does he say, I killed your dad? Because
that's a dramatic cliffhanger.
It is a dramatic cliffhanger, but it's completely unrealistic because he didn't kill her dad. He accidentally let her dad die because he didn't know the rules of his power. Like, there's no world in which he's at fault for the dad's death.
I think it's a really corny ending, an episode ender.
Yeah, especially with that like zoom out camera shot. It's ridiculous.
It's super cheesy. Like, well, because like if you watched, and this is how every cliffhanger works, but if you watched like another 15 seconds of that conversation, she would go, wait, what? And then he would go, well, actually, and then he'd explain it.
Yeah, don't know why I introduced it that way. Kind of weird. So you know my power. Yeah.
You know my power that is literally the reason you're here right now? Well, that it also works in another way that you also know.
Yeah, like we've already talked about and you understand.
I still think it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I think so too. I think
It's dumb. It's dumb ending the episode this way. It's very like dramatic for no reason.
like it could just be like, Chuck, I have something I need to tell you.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something. And then
Good point. That would have been a way better ending.
it
I have
doesn't
something
need to
tell
be
you.
like, hey Chuck, I killed your dad.
Dun dun dun. Harrison. It accompanies the narrator though, because the narrator, and this is like my favorite catchphrase of his, that we haven't pointed out yet, but he always, whenever he's like laying out backstory, goes, "The facts were these."
Yeah, I like that.
It's so charming. I love it.
Yeah.
The facts were these. Basically, he's like, the facts were these. Ned and Chuck know each other well enough. He feels bad about killing her dad. She feels bad about her dad being dead. Boom. This is what happened. And you're like, oh, okay, so that works.
Yeah.
But
They got here, and that's good.
yeah, we were hoping they were going to get here. They did. That's good for now.
And we'll see. I think my prediction will come true that she'll be upset, and then like Emerson will be the one, or Olive maybe will be the one to sort of talk Chuck into like maybe it's okay and it's not his fault. We'll see.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, but Chuck is she's just so reasonable
Yeah.
that I don't know. I don't know how this is going to go. I'm curious to see how they write it.
Me too, man. This finale's got I have a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have much in terms of references here. Oh yeah, really briefly also. They do that like news report thing whenever a bad guy gets caught, and that's always like if you listen for 15 more seconds after the characters stop listening, you'll hear something funny.
Uh-huh.
Like in this episode, it was up next, can apes drive? We find out. It's like a Simpsons cutaway or something.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So there are some pieces of trivia. One, the popcorn print hanging on the wall in the pie maker's bedroom is a famous piece of art called Successive Nows by Rodney White. That's just a recreation, I guess. And then our fourth Hitchcock reference, Dilly's flashback, is a reference to Tippi Hedren's initial bird attack as she crosses Bodega Bay in The Birds.
Bodega Bay.
Bodega Bay.
I've been to Bodega Bay. It's quite nice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I thought that was like Alfred Hitchcock made a funny alliterative name.
Nope, it's a real place in California.
California.
Cauliflowernia.
When Emerson and Chuck visit in jail, Emerson calls Chuck Nancy Shrew. Good jokes. And not really. I like reading these for the ones that I don't get because then I have lots of Googling to do. Like this one. The magazine ad that Burley Bruce reads for Sheila says, "My doll is my co-pilot," which is a reference to the book God is My Co-Pilot by Robert Lee Scott.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard of that. I don't know what things are.
Me neither. I haven't heard of it either.
It's based on a book.
The novel Pushed by Sapphire?
Whenever I read the phrase based on the novel, I always think of Push by Sapphire. And I didn't even think until I was older, man, that push means like pushing a baby out because it's about like a young teen pregnancy.
Oh.
Right, dude? Right? And also drug pushing. Like, I'm so late. I'm so fucking late, y'all. We are so late, but it's so like... Whoa. Shout out to Sapphire.
Shout out to 2000 and late, huh?
Yeah. Oh.
Dang.
Yeah. Learning things, man. Let's tell the people what we're watching next time on DaisyChatz.
All right. Alan, before I tell us what we're watching next week, I just want to make a quick correction because I'm looking at the episode list now that season 2 has 13 episodes. So please don't send us emails about how there are 22.
But if you want to send us emails, do it anyway.
22 total. You can send us emails about other things. Yeah. Don't worry. We fixed it.
Yeah.
Okay. Next week, we're watching the final episode of season 1, episode 9, Corpsicle. When Chuck disappears after discovering Ned's connection to her father's death, Ned finds her with Olive, but she refuses to go back home with him. Meanwhile, Oscar Vibinius continues his attempt to figure out why Chuck smells so different. It's New Year's, and Emerson and Ned investigate the death of an adjuster from the Uberlife Life Insurance Agency, who was found in a snowbank. Lily suffers from hallucinations after Olive inadvertently overdoses a pie with Chuck's homeopathic mood enhancer. All right. Cool.
Sounds like a season finale, man.
Yeah, I'm into it. I'm ready.
Yeah, so we're gonna have a lot of fun with that one. We're gonna do some fun stuff with we're gonna really dig in there and make a whole chunky episode out of that finale. Predictions. I think our best bet, Magellan, is just this is a little bit of behind the scenes. Do the discussion and like just mix in predictions and all
and like an overview of so far and
yeah. We can do all that in that episode.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Magellan, my phone has plenty of battery, but I need to like there's been a lot of thunderstorms lately.
Yeah.
And sometimes what happens is it flips a circuit and then my electronics stay on all day.
Oh.
Right? So I need to charge them.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a plug zone for me, Magellan?
No. It's right over here.
Like we need to just really fully like loud falling. Jesus.
Oh, I found it. It's in between these papers. It's under this pile of leaves. Okay, plugs.
At the bottom of a bowl of cereal. Just Lucky Charms with just the marshmallows.
Ooh, get that green milk. Yum.
Get that like try to chew it in your teeth and then it feels like wax and you want to die. I love it.
Get that candy corn texture.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, plugs. Let's do it.
You can email chats at chatspod@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us at chatspod if you'd like to get at us over there. You should do that. You should write reviews on iTunes. I'm so sorry. We're late in the episode. Check us out. Recommend us if you like us there. And if you want to toss us some money and you want to support us financially, you can go ahead and check out patreon.com/chatspod, where if you back us monthly at $2 or more, you're going to get a monthly film commentary. I know we're a little bit late now to record the first one, but we're going to try and batch a couple of them for you very soon. Go ahead and check that out. We're going to have some fun content for you over there.
Yeah.
John, where can you be found online?
People can find me online on Twitter at JustAFluke. That's JUSTAPFLUKE. They can also listen to another show with my voice called Adulthood on adulthood.simplecast.fm. Alan, what about you?
I'm actually off the grid right now, so I'm not even going to bother plugging my Twitter.
Yes, sir. Don't want to get shocked.
Like that scene in Amazing Spider-Man 2 where the Electro guy goes in the power plant and makes dubstep out of electronics.
Mm-hmm.
God, that movie. You can listen to me on 2 other podcasts, though. One is Fireside Friends, which is found at firesidefriends.net. That's where my friends Ryan, Katie, and I discuss movies, films, video games, movies and films separately, sometimes some short stories, and we talk about it every month, and it's really fun and nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I am also on The Garnet Wager, which is a show where my friend Six and I watch the Korean game show The Genius, and we play a game that we created called Fantasy Genius, where we get points for the different characters doing different things, and there's like drafts, and you can play along at home, and it's a ton of fun. Find that at scanlinemedia.com.
Nice.
That, dear listener, is going to do it for this episode of DaisyChatz. Keep on living.